In 1976, Israeli commandos pulled off what many military experts called impossible, rescuing 102 hostages held by terrorists 2,500 miles from home in just 90 minutes with only one military casualty. What they didn't know was that this mission would revolutionize how special forces around the world approach close quarters combat. Welcome to Arnie's Brain Train, where today we're diving into how Krav Maga, the brutal, efficient martial art created for real-world survival, shaped one of history's most daring rescue operations and why its principles are essential for anyone serious about self-defense. Before we begin, I do want to mention that all the sources used in this video are listed in the description below for those who want to dive deeper into this fascinating story. And trust me, the details of this operation are more incredible than most Hollywood movies. Let's get into it. On June 27, 1976, Air France Flight 139 departed Tel Aviv for Paris with 248 passengers and 12 crew members. After a scheduled stopover in Athens, Greece, disaster struck. 4 terrorists, 2 Palestinians from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and 2 Germans from the revolutionary cells stormed the aircraft armed with pistols and grenades hidden in shampoo bottles. Captain Mikhail Bakos was forced to divert to Benghazi, Libya for refueling, then ordered to continue to Entebbe Airport in Uganda. This was no coincidence. Ugandan dictator Idi Amin was waiting to welcome them, providing additional soldiers to guard the hostages. The situation quickly deteriorated. The terrorists separated passengers by religion and nationality, releasing most non-Israeli citizens but keeping all Jewish passengers regardless of citizenship. In the end, 106 hostages remained, facing a terrifying ultimatum. If Israel didn't release 53 convicted terrorists from prison within 48 hours, executions would begin. This wasn't just a hostage situation, it was a seemingly impossible rescue scenario. Imagine trying to mount a rescue operation that was 2,500 miles from home territory, in a hostile country with an unstable dictator supporting the terrorists, with minimal intelligence about the terminal layout, no ability to conduct close reconnaissance, facing multiple armed terrorists and Ugandan military forces, and with innocent lives hanging in the balance and a ticking clock. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin faced an impossible choice: negotiate with terrorists, breaking Israel's long-standing policy, or attempt a rescue mission with almost impossible odds of success. What many people don't realize is that the solution came from an unexpected source: a martial arts system specifically designed for overwhelming real-world odds, Krav Maga. So we'll get back to the operation itself in just a minute, but first we need to understand what made Krav Maga fundamentally different from other martial arts of its time. This isn't just another fighting style with a foreign name. It's a combat system with a dramatic origin story born from real-world violence. Where most traditional martial arts were developed for sport, ceremony, or spiritual growth over centuries, Krav Maga was created for one purpose only: survival in the most dangerous situations imaginable when your life is on the line. Its founder, Imre Lichtenfeld, grew up in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia in the 1930s as a champion boxer, wrestler, and gymnast. But when fascist groups began targeting Jewish neighborhoods with increasing violence, Lichtenfeld quickly discovered something alarming: his sport fighting skills weren't enough against street violence. Tournament fighting with rules and referees didn't prepare him for multiple attackers with weapons who had no interest in fighting fair. Lichtenfeld gathered young Jewish athletes and began developing a system focused on real-world defense against actual hate-motivated violence. After fleeing Nazi persecution in 1940, Lichtenfeld eventually made his way to British Mandatory Palestine, later Israel, where he joined the parliamentary group Haganah. In 1948, when Israel gained independence, he became chief instructor for physical fitness and Krav Maga for the newly formed Israel Defense Force. What separated Krav Maga from other systems was its core philosophy. 1. Neutralize threats as quickly as possible. In real combat, longer engagements increase danger. 2. Simultaneous defensive and offensive movements. Don't just block, counterattack in the same motion. 3. Target vulnerable areas. No sport restrictions on attacking eyes, throat, or groin. 4. Use the environment as a weapon. Walls, furniture, everyday objects become tools. And 5. Function under extreme stress. Training must prepare you for the psychological impact of real violence. According to historian David Kahn, in his book, Krav Maga, An Essential Guide to the Renowned Method, Lichtenfeld insisted that the system must work not in the dojo, but in the alley with your heart racing at 180 beats per minute and your fine motor skills degraded by adrenaline. This entire system had nothing to do with winning matches or earning colored belts. It was about surviving encounters where there are no rules, no referees, and opponents who may be armed and intending to hurt you. These principles would prove critical for the men planning the seemingly impossible hostage rescue at Entebbe. When Israeli military leaders gathered to plan what would become Operation Thunderbolt, they started at a seemingly impossible problem. The hostages were being held over 2,500 miles away in a country with a military 5 times larger than the rescue force could possibly be, and the clock was ticking. Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Yanni Netanyahu, the 30-year-old commander of Israel's elite Sayeret Matkal unit and brother of future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was chosen to lead the ground forces. A Harvard-educated soldier with combat experience in the Yom Kippur War, Netanyahu understood they faced a no-win scenario with conventional military thinking. Military historian Simon Dunstan says, "The conventional thinking was that rescuing hostages at such distance was impossible. Previous hostage rescues had never been attempted beyond a few hundred miles from base, let alone 2,500 miles into hostile territory." Netanyahu and his planning team turned to unconventional thinking built on the principles of Krav Maga training. As former Mossad officer and Krav Maga instructor, Aaron Cohen explains, "In Krav, we train the worst-case scenario. You assume everything will go wrong and build redundancies into your response." According to military historian Samuel Katz in his book, The Ghost Warriors, the tactical approach incorporated 5 core Krav Maga concepts that would fundamentally change military operations forever. Number 1. The element of surprise. The first C-130 Hercules aircraft would approach with its lights configured to look like a civilian aircraft, landing under the cover of darkness when tower personnel would be less alert. This mirrors Krav Maga's principle of disrupting an attacker's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. Number 2. Environmental awareness. Intelligence services created detailed models of the terminal based on architectural plans obtained from the Israeli construction company that built it years earlier. The rescue force practiced on a full-scale mock-up to eliminate any hesitation when navigating under fire, just as Krav Maga trains practitioners to use environmental awareness in self-defense. Number 3. Overwhelming force. The first assault team would exit vehicles disguised as Idi Amin's entourage, complete with a black Mercedes limousine identical to the dictator's. This psychological disruption before the shooting started reflects Krav Maga's principle of overwhelming an attacker's sensory processing. Number 4. Target prioritization. Operators memorize photos of hostages and terrorists, training to instantly distinguish between them in low-light conditions. A direct application of Krav Maga's split-second threat assessment principles. Number 5. Weapon transitions. The team prepared for every contingency, including weapon malfunctions that would require immediate transition to hand-to-hand combat, reflecting Krav Maga's seamless flow between different combat domains. These weren't just abstract concepts. The assault team spent days rehearsing countless scenarios, deliberately introducing unexpected complications into each practice run. This approach of stress inoculation, training under increasing pressure to build resilience, is a cornerstone of Krav Maga methodology. On July 4, 1976, as Americans celebrated their bicentennial, Operation Thunderbolt began in complete secrecy. 4 C-130 Hercules aircraft took off from Sharm el-Sheikh, carrying 100 elite commandos and their equipment on a daring 2,500-mile journey over hostile territory. The aircraft flew at extremely low altitude, sometimes just 100 feet above the Red Sea, to avoid radar detection from potentially hostile countries along the route. This wasn't just smart military tactics, it embodied the Krav Maga principle of using the environment to your advantage rather than fighting against it. At precisely 11:01 p.m. local time, the first C-130 touched down at Entebbe Airport with its lights configured to resemble a means returning governmental flight. The aircraft taxied normally, but then cut its engine short of the terminal, a deliberate deviation from regular procedures that brought precious seconds. A black Mercedes limousine, identical to Idi Amin's personal vehicle, and 2 Land Rovers drove down the cargo ramp filled with commandos in Ugandan military uniforms. The disguise worked initially, but it didn't last long. When the first team approached the terminal, disaster threatened to unravel the entire operation. According to former Sayeret Matkal Commando Rami Sherman, in an interview with the Times of Israel, "We were spotted by Ugandan soldiers before reaching the terminal. There was no choice but to neutralize them quickly and silently." The team implemented Krav Maga's principle of simultaneous defensive and offensive movements. 2 sentries were neutralized simultaneously with silenced weapons and hand-to-hand techniques to prevent them from raising an alarm, techniques drawn directly from Krav Maga's repertoire of silent neutralization methods. With their cover blown, the assault team accelerated their timeline. The lead assault element burst through the terminal doors, shouting in both Hebrew and English for hostages to stay down. What happened next occurred in just minutes, but required thousands of hours of training to execute. Inside the main hall, chaos erupted as the rescue team confronted terrorists armed with automatic weapons in a room filled with hostages. This scenario, multiple armed opponents with innocent civilians present, is precisely what Krav Maga was designed for. According to Ido Netanyahu's book about his brother Yanni's last battle, the commandos had trained specifically for this moment. Each man knew exactly which sector to cover, which potential threats to prioritize, and how to distinguish terrorists from hostages in a split second. The assault team's movements reflected core Krav Maga principles. They moved directly towards threats rather than seeking cover, aggressive defense. They used precise fire and hand-to-hand combat techniques as the situation demanded, adaptability. They maintained situational awareness despite the chaos, environmental awareness. And they targeted the most immediate threats first, threat prioritization. In just 30 minutes of direct combat, the commandos eliminated all 7 terrorists and numerous Ugandan soldiers, but the victory came at a cost. 3 hostages were killed in the crossfire, and 5 Israeli commandos were wounded. Most tragically, the assault force commander, Lieutenant Colonel Netanyahu, was struck by a Ugandan sniper's bullet and would not survive the day. The entire operation lasted just 90 minutes, from touchdown to takeoff, with 102 of the 106 hostages rescued successfully. The aircraft flew to Nairobi, Kenya for refueling, then returned to Israel where the hostages received a hero's welcome, and the world received a lesson in what determined, well-trained forces could accomplish against seemingly impossible odds. When news of the Entebbe rescue broke worldwide, it was treated as a military miracle. Headlines proclaimed the impossible had been achieved, and military analysts scrambled to understand how Israel had pulled off what many considered the most audacious rescue operation in history. According to counterterrorism expert Dr. John Sullivan, Entebbe changed everything. It showed that with the right combination of intelligence, planning, combat skills, and psychological preparation, even impossible rescue operations could succeed. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Within months, military and counterterrorism units worldwide began sending observers to Israel to learn about the methods that made Entebbe possible. What they discovered wasn't just tactical innovation, but an entire philosophy of combat rooted in Krav Maga principles. Following Entebbe, elite military units worldwide began incorporating these principles into their training regimens. 1. The U.S. Marine Corps revamped their hand-to-hand combat program to incorporate elements of Krav Maga's direct approach into their Marine Corps martial arts program, emphasizing the seamless transition between armed and unarmed combat. 2. German GSG-9. The newly formed German counterterrorism unit adopted scenario-based training focusing on instantaneous threat assessment and decisive action, core Krav Maga concepts that proved critical at Entebbe. 3. British SAS. Already considered elite, the SAS expanded their close-quarters battle doctrine to emphasize environmental awareness and weapon-to-hand transitions that reflected Krav Maga's pragmatic approach to combat. And number 4, the French GIGN implemented the simultaneous defensive-offensive principle in their hand-to-hand combat system, moving away from traditional martial arts toward more practical combat applications. Even the U.S. Secret Service, responsible for protecting the president, incorporated aspects of Krav Maga into their training program. According to former instructor Terry Bowman, after Entebbe, everyone in the protection business realized that traditional martial arts weren't enough. You needed a system designed specifically for modern threats. What made these changes truly revolutionary wasn't just the physical techniques, but the psychological approach. Traditional military combatives had focused on technique mastery in controlled environments. The post-Entebbe approach emphasized training under extreme stress conditions, introducing unexpected variables during practice, psychological preparation for worst-case scenarios, decision-making with incomplete information, and functioning effectively despite fear and adrenaline. In essence, military units worldwide began adopting what neuropsychologists now call stress inoculation training, deliberately exposing operators to increasing levels of stress during training to build resilience for actual combat conditions. This approach, a cornerstone of Krav Maga philosophy, fundamentally changed how special operations personnel prepared for high-stakes missions. While most of us will thankfully never participate in a hostage rescue operation, the core principles that made Entebbe successful are precisely why civilian Krav Maga training has exploded in popularity worldwide. Walk into any major city today, and you'll likely find Krav Maga classes filled with everyone from college students to grandparents. According to self-defense expert Tim Larkin in his book, When Violence is the Answer, the most dangerous situations aren't competitions. They're ambushes where you have milliseconds to react correctly or face potentially fatal consequences. This is where Krav Maga's military heritage becomes relevant to everyday life. Just as the Entebbe commandos couldn't rely on ideal conditions or fair fights, real-world self-defense scenarios rarely unfold in convenient ways. Attacks happen in poor lighting, with multiple assailants, when you're distracted, tired, or unprepared. Krav Maga training provides 5 key benefits applicable to everyday self-defense. 1. Stress inoculation. Training under pressure helps manage the adrenaline dump that occurs in dangerous situations. Through progressive exposure to stress, your body learns to function despite the psychological changes that occur during the attack. 2. Environmental awareness. Learning to identify potential weapons and escape routes in any location. Krav Maga teaches you to constantly assess your surroundings, identifying both threats and resources that could help you in an emergency. 3. Simplicity under pressure. Focusing on techniques that work even when fine motor skills deteriorate. When your heart rate exceeds 175 beats per minute during a threat, complex movements become nearly impossible. Krav Maga emphasizes gross motor skills that remain effective. 4. Realistic scenarios. Preparing for an actual threat rather than sport competition. Training includes defending against multiple attackers, weapons, and common attack scenarios like being grabbed from behind or confronted in confined spaces. And 5. Mental conditioning. Developing the mindset to act decisively when necessary. Perhaps most importantly, Krav Maga helps overcome the freeze response that often occurs in dangerous situations. This is why law enforcement agencies, flight crews, and everyday civilians increasingly turn to Krav Maga for practical self-defense training. As security expert Gavin DeBecker notes in his best-selling book, The Gift of Fear, real self-defense isn't about winning fights, it's about surviving them. The ultimate lesson from both Entebbe and modern Krav Maga training is that preparation matters. When the Israeli commandos faced seemingly impossible odds at Entebbe, it wasn't luck that saved 102 hostages. It was deliberate training and principles that anyone can learn and apply in their own lives. The legacy of Entebbe extends far beyond a single military operation or a footnote in history books. What happened on that night in July 1976 fundamentally changed how we think about overcoming seemingly impossible odds, not just in military operations, but in our everyday lives. When those Israeli commandos touched down in Uganda, they didn't know they were about to change military doctrine worldwide. They were simply focused on the mission at hand, saving innocent lives using the principles they'd trained in for years. That's why the combat philosophy developed for this elite military operation now helps ordinary people around the world protect themselves and their loved ones from harm. The principles of awareness, decisive action, stress management, and environmental adaptation are universal tools for surviving challenging situations of all kinds. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you found this information valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to Arnie's Brain Train for more deep dives into how history, psychology, and tactical thinking intersect. All of our sources used in this video are listed in the description below, and I encourage you to check them out for more details on this fascinating operation. Until next time, keep it moving, keep training your mind and your body, because as Entebbe proved, preparation makes the impossible possible. Stay safe, stay aware, and stay on track. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.